Steel City. Is everybody ready to go? Let's proclaim the greatest radio show.
Welcome, fans, to a new segment we're going to try out here on The Spread. It is a fantasy recap. Me and JDash are in studio, going to do a quick recap of some of these players that did good, did bad. Maybe let you know if we think they may move up a tier next week. We may keep you in suspense and not tell you at all because, we want you to keep on listening.
Do work.
Believe it. Dash. Steelers lost.
Steelers lost.
It was bad.
I had Big Ben at the top of my tier 3 this week.
He should have been at the top of tier 11.
You know what, though? He's the number 3 fantasy quarterback right now. The games aren't over, obviously.
Yeah, those were those garbage time touchdowns, but I get it.
But that's fantasy for me.
Yeah, I understand. I know.
But the number 1 quarterback right now this week is Ryan Fitzpatrick. He had
6 TDs, right?
Yeah, 6 TDs and 358 yards passing. Now, do you think he will be good going forward, or is this just a one-time thing for him?
Fitzpatrick, he's played well for spurts in his career. He's going up against, the Jaguars, I think, next week.
Yeah.
So that could be another good game for him. He's a rhythm passer, so, if he can get rhythm in a game, he can do well. He's not an elite guy. You put him in the right system, you call the right plays, he could give you good fantasy numbers. He has in the past. Fantasy's so different than real life, You can be a great fantasy quarterback and still kind of stink in the NFL.
Well, his last start before he was benched, he had 2 touchdowns in that game, over 20 points in fantasy. So I don't even know if he deserved to be benched besides the fact that they're a bad team and losing. You know what I mean?
Right. He's not better than a lot of quarterbacks, but on his team, he's definitely their best option.
I believe so, too. Andrew Luck blew up.
Believe it.
Everybody knows that's going to happen. Versus Washington, I think I had him as my number 1 quarterback overall, and obviously that was
What were Colt McCoy's stats real quick? We don't have to elaborate. I'm just curious.
He had 392 yards passing and 3 touchdowns. He's sitting at number 5 right now. So.
Maybe a product of being behind the whole game, or do you think he's legit? Because I think he's just garbage, honestly.
Yeah, I wouldn't go with him moving forward. This is a game where against Indy, you're going to be passing a ton, and he did pass a ton, and he got it done, though. He looks better than RG3, let me tell you.
I guess.
Thursday, Mark Sanchez had a pretty decent game.
Butt fumble.
Yeah, you can call him whatever you want. He's playing a lot better than we both thought he would. When he took, what do you mean? Let me tell you, I think I'm going to pick him up and start playing him because I have Cam Newton and Jay Cutler. And Jay Cutler isn't bad, but Mark Sanchez is looking better right now.
Newton's usually beast in fantasy. He's having a down year. Cutler's a little bleep, and I don't know.
Well, Newton, his offensive line is so terrible. You can't trust anybody in that offense. Maybe Kelvin Benjamin, just because they're going to have to pass to try to catch up towards the end of games. Bridgewater threw 2 TDs again for the 2nd week in a row. What do you think about him?
Teddy's a young guy. There's not a lot of film on him. I've said it a bunch. If there's not a lot of film on a guy, you have a chance for success just because you can be sneaky in what you do. He was a high pedigree player coming out of college. Some people projected him as the top quarterback before the draft. He fell a little bit to the Vikings. He can play well. If the Vikings put the right plays around him and they feature their offense to what his strengths are, he definitely can play well. Move him around, give him some high percentage passes, give him 1 or 2 options and let him move with his feet a little bit. He definitely can play well.
Well, most leagues' fantasy playoffs start next week in week 14. Now, Bridgewater has 2 games in a row where he threw 2 touchdowns, and he's going up against a terrible pass defense in the New York Jets next week. Would you trust him if you don't have a great quarterback?
Is he starting for the Steelers or the Vikings?
For the Vikings?
Okay, well then you're fine, because as long as it's not the Steelers, then they would dominate him if he played for us.
All right, let's move on to some running backs.
Run it. I was running.
Well, I had Arian Foster as my number 1 running back this week.
Did he play?
Yeah, he definitely played. He had 79 yards rushing, 5 catches for 26 and a touchdown. He ended up in the top 10, but he was nowhere near the top few running backs.
Well, Le'Veon Bell had 8 catches for 159 yards, and we're living the PPR life here at the Spread Studios. So when you do that as a running back at PPR and then run for 95 yards and get a touchdown, that's PP dominant.
How about Trey Mason blowing up this week? He only had 14 carries, but he had 117 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he scored again in the passing game. So he had 3 touchdowns on the day.
I don't know. St. Louis is garbage, but this dude seems like he's legit. And with Sean Hill, quarterback, they have a little bit of a threat of a passing game, so he has a chance to get big chunks of yards. Rams O-line's not bad.
Well, moving into the playoffs for him, though, he goes at Washington next week. Washington is very good at stopping fantasy running backs. They've been doing it all season. And then after that, he goes to Arizona. Right now, Steven Jackson looks pretty good today versus Arizona, but throughout the season, Arizona has been pretty much the number one team against fantasy running backs. So in the playoffs, it's going to be tough for Trey Mason to get you the wins you're going to need.
So you're saying it's a tough matchup.
Yeah, he got a couple. If you can make it to the championship, that might be a week you want to play him because the Giants are not good at stopping running backs.
Hey, if you need to find any good matchups throughout the week, all you got to do is hit us up on Twitter at bet_the_spread. You can even hit us up on Facebook. We'll answer those questions. We got all the answers.
Rashad Jennings had 91 yards and 2 touchdowns today, but he left the game with an ankle injury, so we're going to have to see how that plays out during the week. But he is always in my tier 2, so this is going to be a big loss if he can't play. Especially, look, week 14 at Tennessee. Tennessee is terrible. Le'Veon Bell, McCoy, who'd they play today? Foster. All three of those guys blew Tennessee's defense up in the past 3 weeks, and now Rashad Jennings is going to have them next week if he plays. But that's going to be a big loss. You might want to go out and grab Andre Williams. What do you think?
I don't know. Andre Williams he usually plays good in relief of, the running backs. He's a good number 2 guy. He's good in the passing game. My question to you is, if a tier 2 guy is out, does somebody move up from tier 3, or does tier 2 just lose a guy? How does that work?
Tier 2 is just going to lose a guy. I'm not going to move anybody up from tier 3 that I don't think should be a must start every week. But if Andre Williams is the starter next week, he's not going to be in my tier 2, but you might see him up there in tier 3 or 4. So I would go add Williams if you find out Jennings is not going to play this week coming up.
If you want to know if Jennings is going to play or not, hit us up on Twitter at bet_the_spread.
How about Boom Herron? He had 88 yards rushing and a touchdown, and he looks like the best back in Indy. I seen you had a tweet from someone that said Trent Richardson is still the best running back out there.
Yeah, that guy don't know what he's talking about.
No way. If Boom Herron is still available, listen, he's only owned in a little bit less than 50% of the leagues. If he's out there in your fantasy league, he is a must-add right now. Me and Easy were talking about Roy Halu Jr. this week.
Sounds like a lot of work for Easy.
That he might have a decent chance of having a good game because they were going at Indy, and he's used in the passing game, and we knew that they would be passing a lot, and he did. He had 4 catches for 61 yards and a touchdown, so it worked out for him this week. But moving forward, I'm not so sure. He got St. Louis at New York and then Philly. Philly might be a game that I could see him having another big game.
Well, which New York team? Sorry to cut you off.
The Giants.
Oh, yeah, they're garbage.
They are, but the thing is, they can't stop running back, so that's more of an Alfred Morris game there to me.
What if Alfred Morris breaks his ankle? What if Roy Halu hires a hitman to take Alfred Morris out so his fantasy stock rises because he has him on his fantasy team and he needs to win that championship?
Well, obviously, if Alfred Morris gets picked off by the shooter on the grassy knoll.
The grassy knoll's a bitch.
Then, yeah, you want to start Halu.
All right. Good advice. If something happens to Halu, it was not me, just so everybody knows.
What about Cincinnati's running backs? They have Jeremy Hill and they have Giovanni Bernard.
Giovanni Hill.
Who do you like moving forward?
Jeremy Bernard. I don't know. Bernard kind of seems feeble. When he's healthy, he dominates because he can play all 3 downs. He blocks well for a small guy. But every time he gets hurt, Hill has a big game, and then they want to keep Hill in there. He was a second-round pick, right? Pretty sure
he was a high pick. I'm not sure if it was second round or not.
I'm almost positive he was a second-round pick. Cincinnati had high hopes for him. When they had Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis running hard between the tackles and a guy coming out of the backfield on 3rd downs for the passing game, Andy Dalton played better. So when he has that check down back and that big back, he's a lot more comfortable behind the line of scrimmage.
But you didn't answer my question. Who would you go with through the playoffs?
Who are they playing?
They have Pittsburgh, at Cleveland, and then Denver in 14, 15, and 16.
I'd go with Hill against Pittsburgh because Hill is between the tackles runner a little better. We're soft up the middle, as much as I don't want to say that. McClendon's been out. Brett Kiesel just tore his triceps. Cam Thomas is garbage. McCullers is a rookie, so you can take advantage of him easily. You got to go with Hill. He's going to run up the middle pretty easy. Bernard out of the backfield. We don't get burnt too much by that. We get more burnt by a cutback runner. So you don't really catch too many passes as a running back against the Steelers. And then what was our next game?
At Cleveland.
Cleveland, their defense is kind of stout, but I think they're complete garbage, so I may go with Bernard for his big playability in that game.
And the last one was Denver. I think that is a great game for Bernard compared to Jeremy Hill.
Yeah, you're going to be throwing the ball a lot. Hill might help you out if you're in short yardage situations or, 10 yards into the goal line. Other than that, I'm going to go with Bernard most of the time. He catches the ball well. He does block well, so he'll be able to protect Dalton's blind side as well as provide an extra option in the passing game.
Let's move on to some receivers. The number one receiver this week, he blew up. He's on my bench in fantasy, unfortunately.
It's Jeff Keel?
No, you're dead wrong.
Man, every week I think it's Jeff Keel.
DeAndre Hopkins had 9 catches for 238 yards and 2 touchdowns. And like we were saying, Fitzpatrick blew up this week. And he's looked better with Hopkins and Johnson than Mallett has, even though Mallett looked good his first game. But when Fitzpatrick was in at quarterback earlier this year, Hopkins was one of the most consistent receivers in fantasy, and I expect that moving forward. I love DeAndre Hopkins. I trust him, and I'm going to play him in the playoffs. He has at Jacksonville, at Indy, and then Baltimore over the next 3 weeks, which is all great matchups. It seems like Baltimore is probably the worst matchup, but I disagree because Baltimore is terrible at stopping receivers in those first 2 games too, Jacksonville and Indy. Those are going to be 2 great matchups for Hopkins, and I am playing him all through the playoffs. 2 receivers here that I said were going to have big weeks, and I was right. They're the number 3 and 4 receivers for this week.
It sounds like you're saying you were right a lot here. I don't know.
Hey, I was right. Listen, do you remember me saying Keenan Allen was going to have a big week?
I remember me saying Keenan Allen was going to have a big week.
You remember you saying. He had 11 catches for 121 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Get some.
I'm really liking this guy. He's picked it up a lot over the past few games. He's had 1 bad game over the past 5, and he might be a guy that moves up to tier 2 for me.
A little off topic real quick, not necessarily off topic, but what did Kenny Britt do, my boy? He do anything?
I think he had 1 catch. It was Stedman Bailey again this week. He looks like the better receiver out there.
So Britt caught one catch for 100 yards and a touchdown, right?
Yeah, dead wrong.
Damn.
But listen, back to Keenan Allen real quick.
Yeah, somebody who's good, sorry.
He has New England next week. Seems like a game they're going to have to pass, correct?
Maybe.
And then he has Denver the next week, and that's another game that it seems like San Diego is going to have to pass.
My only point is Allen the number 1 receiver in San Diego right now?
If you ask me, it's definitely him.
Okay, well then Darrelle Revis is going to be covering him, if not that Browner in New England. So although they are going to be throwing a lot, that's going to be a tough matchup for Allen.
Yeah, it will be a tough matchup for him.
Revis Island is a tough place to be.
But he has at least 9 targets over his past 6 games. He's had up to, actually this week was his season high, I believe. Yep, 14 targets. So he's just getting more and more looks. He has 3 touchdowns over his past 2 games. I'm really liking this guy. I play him in the playoffs. And then the other guy I was talking about is Kenny Stills.
Ugh.
He had 5 catches for 167 yards, I believe, 162 yards and a touchdown. This is
torched us.
I think he might be the number 1 guy in New Orleans now. And
with Cooks out, definitely Stills looks like the number 1.
He's owned in less than 50% of the league. So if you're looking for a receiver for the playoffs here, look, he got Carolina, at Chicago, and Atlanta.
All bad defenses.
Oh, my. What great matchups for Kenny Stills moving forward. This is a must-add right now if you need a receiver at all. Even if you don't, try to drop something that you don't need and pick up Kenny Stills. He's a beast.
Dial up that waiver wire. Pick up Kenny Stills.
And I also said Moncrief might be a guy that starts to pick it up moving forward, and he had a big game too.
The count.
He had 3 catches for 134 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now his targets weren't high, but he's definitely the number 3 out there now behind Wayne and Hilton. Hakeem Nicks, garbage. Dante Moncrief, he's a guy that's pretty much owned in every league. So if you're in a deep league, Dante Moncrief is a great receiver to add. Now, we know that Jacksonville has a lot of problems on their offense, and they have a bunch of good but not great receivers. Their best receiver, Allen Robinson, went down for the season earlier. They have Allen Hurns, who's okay. He has a big play threat, but he's inconsistent. And then they have Cecil Shorts. But Marquise Lee was the best receiver for them this week. He really didn't do much all year, but he's starting to show himself in this offense. He had 6 catches for 75 yards and a touchdown. Would you trust him at all moving forward?
Don't forget about the human arrest record in Justin Blackmon.
Yeah, he's not there, is he?
Well, he's still on the team.
He's still, well, whatever. They don't play him.
Marquise Lee's an interesting player. Who they got coming up?
They have Houston, who's terrible. They have at Baltimore, who can't stop the pass.
They can't stop the pass.
And then Tennessee, who you just seen Fitzpatrick blow up for 6 touchdowns.
Lee's got all the talent. He's coming out of what? USC, right? First year?
Yeah, this is his rookie season. I was actually coming into the season, he was on my sleeper list, and I thought I was dead wrong about it, but maybe towards the playoffs here I could be correct.
I mean, Blake Bortles has had some time at quarterback now. Maybe he could be building a rapport with Lee. I know there are reports of them working together after practice a little bit more, staying to catch some balls. So they could be that 1-2 punch that the Jaguars offense is looking for. Denard Robinson's running the ball a little bit better. They can get their own little version of the Three Amigos going on down there.
All right, let's get back to Stedman Bailey. We were talking about him for a second before.
What a name.
I like the name. He has 15 targets.
Would.
He has 15 targets over his past 2 games, 12 catches for 189 yards and a touchdown in that span. He looks like the number 1 receiver in St. Louis right now over Kenny Britt, your man. But he's, 1% owned. So he's out there for everybody.
I think everybody's just afraid to own anybody in the Rams offense right now. Maybe not their running backs because they run the ball fairly well. But with the merry-go-round at quarterback, their offense just hasn't been good at all, even under Sam Bradford over the last couple years. I think just the team name and everything alone scares the average fan away who doesn't really know what they're talking about. So that could be why he's only owned in 1% of leagues.
Well, how about this? In Week 14, he goes at Washington. They're good at stopping the run, so teams pass all over him. So he has a good matchup there. And then the next week, he goes versus Arizona, who is great at stopping the run, and the only way teams move the ball there is passing. So he has 2 great matchups. Now, in Week 16, it might be a little more dicey. The New York Giants, yeah, they're a bad defense, but they can't stop the run too, so it's kind of hard to say there. But the next 2 weeks, I'm liking Stedman Bailey, I think.
If you can't do something and you got a name like Stedman, you're going to get taped to the goalpost or something.
How about Greg Jennings, man? He keeps doing it. Scored another touchdown this week.
Ageless wonder. Maybe he found the fountain of youth in Minnesota.
I mean, he's not going to have the huge games anymore, obviously, but if you're just looking for a consistent 12 to 15 points, he's a good option to play, it seems like. He's just doing it every week.
38 years old, 45 years old, whatever he is, he's still going to get points.
Ruben Randall's been disappointing to me.
His name's Ruben.
Over the past 2 weeks.
You're named after a nasty sandwich.
Listen, he has 4 targets this week, and he had 3 targets last week. That was
7.
That was after 8 straight games of 9 or more targets, and he had up to 15 in one game in that span.
Well, maybe that's Eli's fault, not so much Mr. Randall's.
Yeah, it's disappointing. Yeah, Odell Beckham Jr. is stepping up as the top receiver, but you don't just abandon throwing the ball to Randall. It makes no sense to me. Randall's been a pretty good receiver all season long.
You know what a Reuben's called with turkey on it instead of corned beef?
What?
A Rachel.
A Rachel. So Rachel Randall here.
Rachel Randall. He needs to step it up to get that name Reuben back.
All right, let's move on to tight ends real quick.
All right, I'll make fun of some of them.
Well, how about Kobe Fleener this week?
Kobe, we said it.
Yeah, he was our top of tier 3, which is anything but must starts. But really, I think I might move him into a must start now.
Our boy Heath Miller had a pretty good game, even though you call him washed up every week.
I actually had the top 2 tight ends in fantasy this week. I sat Jordan Reed, who had 9 catches for 123 yards, but I did play Kobe Fleener, who had the 2 touchdowns for 127 yards.
I always hate on Reed. You like that guy, and he come out and played big this week, so I guess you got me this week. Who else did good? Bennett, Miller, Gates, they had good weeks.
Yeah, again, back to Reed. RG3 is such garbage. You just see it now. He did nothing. Colt McCoy can get these guys the ball. How sad is that?
I never thought RG3 was a good quarterback to begin with. They ran that stupid read option offense that
you
was
had
new
to think
the
he was
NFL.
better than Colt McCoy.
Well, Snake McCoy's the truth.
But
they ran that stupid offense, the read option, and all that does is leave your quarterback out to dry and to get blasted in the face and get concussions and broken legs and torn ligaments. And there was no way he was going to last playing the offense he was. You just can't do it. You can't run around that much as a quarterback and survive. And the injuries have really killed him. Now they're in his head. He's not setting his feet right. He's not using his body right. He's arming the throws all the time. He's just lost it, man. He's lost any little bit that he had.
Other than that, man,
his name's Robert Garbage III.
Tight ends pretty much did nothing this week, man. There's a couple, like the couple you mentioned, and I don't know, man. That's pretty much it. That's how tight end's been all season long, though. Kyle Rudolph, he had 8 points. He did score a touchdown. At least he found the end zone. Maybe he'll pick it up moving forward now.
It could be, tight end's been blown up the last few years. Maybe some teams spent time in the offseason trying to, figure out a little bit better scheme to try to hold tight ends to, a little less yards, so teams are focusing on the position more. It's not just a blocking position, an extra offensive lineman like it used to be. And let's face it, nobody wants to play tight end. The glamour position is running back, wide receiver, quarterback. Maybe not so much running back as it was in the past. A tight end is usually a offensive lineman who's not big enough, or a wide receiver that's too big. So you're usually not getting that great of a skill guy.
How about Vernon Davis? 2 catches, 13 yards. It's
give up on him,
If you
folks.
still own him, it's time. Just drop him. Go pick up one of those guys we mentioned, like Boom Herron.
Trade him for a Permane sandwich if you can. Get anything.
Yeah, I'd rather play Owen Daniels each week.
I'd rather play Big Easy, and he's sitting on my couch drinking beer, I think. Well, thanks, fans, for tuning in to our first ever fantasy recap for Week 13. Thanks, Dash, for sitting in. It's always a good time. You do a lot of hard work on this. Any fantasy questions you guys have, you can reach us on Twitter at bet_the_spread.
Or send us emails.
Check us out on Facebook. Our email is thespread00@gmail.com. Subscribe to that YouTube channel. Throw some comments out there. We want to know what you guys think. Give us some feedback.
Fantasy crunch time.
We do the show for you. We want you guys to be happy. Believe it.